Hi, I'm Donna from the Masquerade, and today I'm going to do a tutorial for you, and I'm doing it in my Zoom format so that you can see what it's like when I do a Zoom class. There's going to be a couple of views so you can see my hands doing whatever they need to be doing, and you can see me. So let's get started. We're going to work on this Star Baby center of the quilt. I've already put together my 8-pointed star in groups of 2. And in doing so, as I sewed from the outside to the inside, I stopped my seam just a quarter of an inch before I got to the center. You can stitch all the way, but you've got to do it with a big enough stitch that you can easily pull them free. You don't back tack. You want to be able to pull out enough that a quarter of an inch is free. I like to just stop at the quarter of an inch, and then I pull my needle out and leave some threads hanging so that they won't pull all the way through and tear back more than it needs to tear back. So let's get started. Okay, so let's sew this. I'm using an open toe foot so that you can see what I'm doing here, but it's also a quarter of an inch, so I can just follow along the edge of the foot. So I'm going to take a couple stitches and back tack. You don't want to back tack in the middle of the quilt, but on the corners, it's quite all right. Now I'm getting to one of those seams that I've pinned, and I know that my pin is exactly where I want it to be, so I'm gonna pull it out as I go. And I just stitched exactly where the pin was stuck, so I'm hoping it's okay. And here we come to another one. So I'm just gonna pull it as I go. And another one. Here's the last seam I have to match. Now I'm coming to the very end, and I'm aiming for this spot that I put my pin in, which is right where everything ends. So I'm going to pull the pin as I go, and I've made sure that my seam allowances are all out of the way, and it's just the 2 layers of fabric. I'm not going to catch any seam allowances in there. And I'm going to bring my stitch length down just a little bit and hand crank the last 2 stitches. And I think that's it. And now I want to leave a little bit of a tail, like I did on the other ones. And there you can see they all come to an end right at the same point. So now I'm going to put this back up on the board and put the other 2 together. And this one, I'm making sure that the orange and the yellow are stitched together. Okay, so here we are at the end of the next one, and I want to make sure that my seam allowances are away from the needle towards me. And I want to make sure that everything is lined up. And I want to know right where I'm aiming for. That spot. which is here. And I think I have an extra stitch or two in there. I'm going to actually pull them out now while I got them right under my fingertips. Right there. And I can always go back in and pull another stitch if I have to when I'm trying to lay it flat. So I am just going to go with that. There's one more stitch out of there. And that's where I'm aiming for, right there. You can see the little bit of a black stitch there. That's what I'm aiming for, right before that. And I can feel a bump under there, so I'm not completely lined up. There we go. Now it stops right at the folds. That's what I want right there. It's better to be slow and get it right the first time. So take your time while you're doing this. I'm going to bring my stitch length down just a little bit. I'm going to hand crank to that last stitch right there. I'm going to leave some threads. Let's see. There we go. They all end right at the same spot. Perfect. So now it's time to put the two together, the two halves of the quilt together. So I'm going to get the other half. And they're going to go right sides together. And you want to make sure that these little points in here are going to line up nicely. So when I flip it back up, I want to make sure that they end in the same exact spot. And that's right where that is. So I'm going to put a pin to hold that down here. And I'm going to have to look at it closely when I get to it while I'm sewing. But I also want to make sure that all of these are going to match. So I have to line each one of them up too. And again, I'm going to start from the outside edge and I'm going to stop when I get to that point where they all meet. And I'm going to try to make sure that I don't catch any of the seam allowances at that center spot. When you fold it back like that to check on them, it's good to give it a little finger press so that you have a nice crease to follow when you're going over that area where it intersects. Because then you'll know it's right where it needs to be. And then those smart corners get matched up nicely. Now, this is the Star Baby quilt, and these big sections of background are all cut on the bias. So you don't want to pull, you don't want to stretch, you want to let the feed dogs do their job pulling it through. And here I am, this is the center of the quilt. So I want to make sure that my seam allowances, all of them, Even this one that's pressed forward. I want everything out of the way. And I'm aiming for that one spot that everything else is stopping. That one convergence point. And you can see that it's right here on this one and this one. It's up a little higher, so it looks like I'll end up taking a little stitch out of there, but let me aim for this spot right here. Hand crank till I get to that spot. Let's see how we did so far. Oh yes, those are all landing right in the same spot. Now to continue on the seam, I can start at the outside edge and come back to the center, or I could push all of this away from me, all of the seam allowances, and put my needle in and start there. I like to start from the outside edge and work to the center, only because when I do this and I have all that bulk under my foot, sometimes it gets caught and it doesn't move very well. So I'm going to actually start from the other edge and go toward the center. So match those smart corners. And each of these seams again. When I get to the middle, I got to pay attention again. Okay, here we come to the middle. Now I want to make sure, I got to look in there very closely, and I want to make sure everything is going to land in the same point. So when I find out where that point is, and I get all my seam allowances away from the needle toward me, I can see right where that point is. And I'm going to aim right for that. And I'm going to just hand crank the last couple stitches to make sure that I end right at that point. Again, I'm going to leave a tail and I cut it off. All right. Proof is in the pudding. Let's see what this looks like. Well, I'm very happy with that. They all end in the same spot. Now the trick is to make this lay flat. Right now it's a big lump in here. It's a big puffy lump. And when you look at the back, you can see why. It's a big mess of seams. But you also can see, when you look closely at each one of them, you can see that none of them are stitched down. All these seam allowances are loose, nice and loose. If you come across any that are stitched, this is the time that you take the stitch out, but I don't see any. They're all loose. So now we are going to press this, and we're going to do what we've been doing and press the seam allowances all in one direction. So I'm going to lay this nice and flat. And you can see I was going counterclockwise with the previous one, so I'm going to do the same thing. Once I've got all these outside ones nice and flat, I can work on the inside. I can work on this bump. What I want to do is coax each one to lay flat, one at a time. Holding them as I go. This isn't something you rush. You got to be very sure that there's nothing holding them back. Like I see this pink and this red one are held together by a stitch or two right here. That stitch has got to come out. So I'm going to go in and pull out one stitch. I want to be very careful I don't rip it. I just want to pull it. There we go. Then the next one goes over. The next one goes over. And the next one goes over. And then they all fall right into place. So I'm going to hit them with the iron. See how nice and flat those are? And then I like to hit it with best press, a little bit of spray starch. Well, that's very nice. I like that a lot. I'm happy with that. I'm going to show you what the other side looks like. Got to back this up a bit. Look at that. That is very nice. I'm very happy with the way that landed. Everything lands perfectly in the center. It's nice and flat. Nothing's bumpy, easy to quilt over if you need to. Hit it with a little more starch. I'll get the rest of these pressed, the rest of the seam out to the corners pressed. And it looks like all my little junctions are nice and matched up. And that will be the end of this tutorial. So I'm very happy with the outcome of this. And if you take your time and do it without rushing through it, and you be very careful with each step, you can get a perfect flat center of your 8-pointed star too. So try a LoneStar. They're lots of fun. You'll be happy with the outcome. Till next time, bye.